Morning, everyone. This is a really exciting topic and much more relevant today than it was 3 months ago, which I'll tell you why. I've been in data science for quite a number of years, and part of that work, both in the financial services world and also especially at eBay, has overlapped with the privacy domain. So we've always had to think about privacy and implications. Things are getting much more serious and far-reaching in that area in the EU recently and pending. And I want to talk about why that is. Let me ask first to start, how many of you are specifically from a privacy background? Is there anyone here who's really privacy background? Okay. Data science? How many of you are sort of, okay. So that helps me kind of steer a little bit more. So I'll maybe give a little bit more emphasis on what's new for privacy as opposed to what's new from data science. So I'll start with a brief intro so you know a bit more about who I am. And I'm going to open with 2 case studies which really illustrate what we're dealing with. These are both high-profile events you may have heard of, and they'll set the stage for how privacy really can conflict or enhance data science and data management in high-profile ways. I'm going to talk about data science, and then I'm going to talk about some very important privacy issues towards the end. So who I am, I'm from the United States originally, educated at Cornell, did my PhD in math and computer science there. Taught for a while at the University of Pennsylvania in advanced analytics, did some work in decision support systems, quantitative finance. Then eBay brought me on board to help out with the global analytics for the classifieds group. So that is sort of the BI, the data science, the analytics and such for the global portfolio. So a lot of multinational privacy exposure there. And more recently, I started off on my own, so I'm doing independent consulting now, generally on data science, data management and data science, and part of that is focused also on issues related to privacy. For that part, I also work with an ex-eBay colleague of mine, who is the privacy advisor for eBay in the EU, and that's the company Assured Privacy. So for the privacy portion, I work together with them. Also hang out with the guys at Zomnia sometimes, so I'll get involved with projects with them. More focused on data science, which is cool. High profile case number 1. How many of you have heard of this one? Target. Okay, I thought there'd be more people. Someone mentioned it yesterday. Okay, so Target Corporation, 2002, second largest discount retailer in the United States. So in the US, this is huge. This is a household name. It's everywhere. $70 billion in annual turnover. Stuck in head-to-head competition with Walmart, the leader, difficult to gain any market share, but they had a strategic vision, and that strategic vision was based on the power of habit. So the executives, not data scientists, said, we're going to grow our business by tapping into the power of habit, identifying our customer segments, which are open to changes in habit. So who, as an adult shopper, is most likely to change their shopping habits? Young couples who've just had their first child. Okay. Target realized if we can identify which of our shoppers are pregnant, we can make millions, literally. And that's what they did. They went to their data scientists. They said, identify for us which of our shoppers are expecting children. Once you tell us that, we'll hit them with marketing and get them to start buying all the baby products at Target. Okay. And it worked like a charm. Fantastic results. The data scientists were able to pinpoint within a very small window, very high accuracy, which shoppers at Target, and we're talking about hundreds or thousands of stores here, which of those shoppers were actually expecting children and when those children were coming. Then they could start selling them, sending them marketing flyers. It worked so well, in fact, that they made national news when an angry father in Minneapolis walked into a Target store demanding to talk to the manager, saying, why are you sending my teenage daughter, who is certainly not pregnant, advertisements for baby clothes? What are you trying to influence her to do? Store manager has no idea, apologizes, takes the phone number. Week later, he phones the father again to apologize. Father's on the phone, very humble and apologetic himself. As it turns out, dear manager, I owe you an apology. Turns out my daughter is expecting, hadn't realized it, stuff's going on, that behind my back. Oh, and by the way, how did you know she was expecting? Because I didn't and I live with her. Okay, makes national news, Target's in the headlines. Was this legal or not legal? Perfectly legal. Perfectly legal. All this poor girl did is she went to Target and bought some vitamins, some hand lotion, that type of thing. Okay? Target, in turn, identified very personal private information about her and sent her a flyer regarding that. Perfectly legal, but most people would agree, quite creepy. Question, would this be legal in the EU? Okay, a bit of a trick question. I'll tell you why later. Second case, 4 years later, Netflix. Actually, I just posted something about this on my LinkedIn publication, so there's more information about that here, but I'll give you a quick rundown what happened here. Netflix, disruptive video technology, fantastic innovation. Okay, started in 1998. By 2006, they'd grown to almost 6 million users, and they were doing something really cool with data science. What they were doing is they would keep track of what movies you'd watched, what ratings you'd given those movies, and based on your ratings of past movies, they would recommend to you another good movie to watch. Okay? So this was really cool because not only was it cool machine learning, artificial intelligence / data science, not only was it a cool algorithmic toy, but it was really aligned with the user's interests. Okay? It didn't creep people out, people liked it. People knew what was going on, and they were benefiting from it. So that was really good. 2006, Netflix tried something fun, and they said, let's outsource our algorithm. We've got our internal algorithm, which they call Cinematch. They said it works pretty well, let's make it better. And what better way to make something better than to outsource it, to crowdsource it? We'll let the whole world work on our algorithm and make it better. So they put aside $1 million cash prize for this. $1 million to the team or individual who could top Netflix's own data science algorithm by at least 10%. Oh, and by the way, they have to release training information for that. Okay, so here's where it gets tricky. Every country and state has its own definition of what's private. Okay? And as it happens, and this is a very funny story, which unfortunately I don't have time to tell, but it's a very funny story why in the United States your video rental history is absolutely private as protected by an act of Congress in 1988. Okay, so Netflix was not allowed to release rental histories, but it needed to release something to crowdsource this algorithm. So it took all the rental histories, erased the name of the people, and sent them out into the ecosystem. Okay, push, there it goes. All this data, all this private data, which has been anonymized. Okay, what happens? Within a month, data scientists have started to de-anonymize this federally protected private data that Netflix has released. Okay, bad news for Netflix. They settled out of court, class action lawsuit. They were going to have a follow-up prize, which of course was quickly canceled. But they were well-intentioned. It wasn't a PR violation. I mean, it wasn't a PR disaster like it could have been for Target. Okay, so two cases which were really high profile, which were very different in different ways. Okay, the one was perfectly legal, but very bad from a privacy perspective. Okay, it gave a very bad feeling to the users. The second was not necessarily legal. I mean, there wasn't, it was settled out of court, so we can't say what the final result was. But it was something which was a corporation not realizing the exposure that they were taking on, and the result of that was essentially a legal penalty, a financial loss to the company because of not realizing the exposure that their data science efforts were putting them up to. Okay, and there's also two different legs here that are illustrated. From the Target perspective, it's the privacy. From the Netflix perspective, it's the data protection. Okay, and these are two things you'll see in the EU Charter. These are two rights that are fundamental rights in the EU Charter, which are guaranteed: privacy and data protection. Okay, privacy and data protection, both of which were violated in these two cases. Okay, so now let's talk a bit more about data science. Okay, because that's more relevant to the big data, and I want to set the stage to say why it is that privacy and data are so related here. Okay, so most of you have backgrounds in data science to some extent. You know the cool uses of data science. Okay, data science, it does a lot of stuff. There's a lot of really neat algorithms. We love it. We want to do more of it. But essentially, one of the main focuses of data science is helping marketing, Okay, that's one of the applications. How do we help marketing? Well, we do that by personalization. Understanding your customer, understanding which of your customers, for example, are pregnant. Which of your customers are young, rich, single people who want to spend a lot of money, right? Which of your customers are most likely are the best targets for your marketing efforts, okay? Another thing we do in data science, especially in banks, insurance, we look at propensity to do something, propensity to default. If you're a telco provider, propensity to churn, okay? So we want to profile people, we want to classify people, we want to find out as much as we can about people in order to help the business run better, okay? So you can see from one side, we've got data science pushing up and saying, tell me more about people. From the other side, we've got privacy coming down and saying, yes, but privacy needs to be protected, okay? So there's a difficulty in aligning those two objectives and not having them sort of tread on each other. So it really has to be well thought out of how do we align the objectives of data science with privacy. And the other thing about data science too is that what we realize is, and this is the difference sort of between machine learning and data science as a whole, one of the key components of data science is getting more data, okay? More data means more insights. Okay, so the key part of data science is collecting more data sources. So it's taking the traditional data that we have in our systems, adding in the big data, adding in the Internet of Things, adding in smart sensors, adding in third-party data. The reason I had this puzzle picture here is to illustrate the fact that, look, you know, I've got a missing piece from this puzzle. I can use techniques to guess what's in that missing piece, right? I can do image recognition or pattern extension or whatever to guess what the missing pieces of a puzzle are. The best thing is to actually get those pieces and put them in, okay? I can do statistical methods against 100 data points and have an error margin, but if I've got 1,000 data points rather than 100, how much better is that than a slightly better regression algorithm, okay? So more data beats better algorithms. So our goal as data scientists is to get as much data as we possibly can, okay? Again, this is also gonna bring us right against the wall of privacy, because the goal of privacy, not the goal of privacy, but the way this plays out is to limit access to data. Okay, so it's really something you need to balance. Let me give you an example of this. The third case study has to do with healthcare. Now, healthcare is also protected in the United States, and of course, in the EU also. Here's an example from also from 2002. There was a researcher at Carnegie Mellon University named LaTanya Sweeney who made a claim. She said 87% of the population of the United States, so 87% of several hundred million people, could be uniquely identified if you tell me just 3 things about them. Tell me if they're male or female, tell me when they were born, and tell me their postal code. Now, postal codes in the US are different than Europe. A postal code is, you think, roughly 8,000 people per postal code. So Utrecht would have several dozen postal codes, okay? So she said, if you give me those 3 points of information, I can uniquely identify 87% of the US population. And to prove it, she did the following experiment. The General Insurance Council of the state of Massachusetts kept records on 135,000 federal employees and their visits to hospitals and doctors. They thought, well, hey, we've got all this great medical information here. Wouldn't it be cool if we opened up to researchers? They could find trends and such. So they did what Netflix did. They said, we're going to take these 135,000 federal health records, strip out the names, but leave everything else in, and set it loose to researchers. Okay? So what LaTanya Sweeney did is she used data science techniques. She coupled that information with census data, also released by the government, and she picked out the name of the governor of the state of Massachusetts and identified his health records. Also extremely embarrassing, all using public data. But the point is that what she did is she took additional data sources, she took multiple data sources, and by combining multiple data sources, she was able to de-anonymize data, which had been released and had been thought to be safe, and produce personally identifiable information which was protected by federal law. Okay, so this is the danger, the potential of bringing new data on, and the danger of, as a corporation, not having proper understanding of the risks you have with your data. Okay, So the state of Massachusetts released data. They thought it was all safe. Actually, what they did is they exposed themselves to risk. Now, it was the state of Massachusetts. I think the governor of the state of Massachusetts did not bring a lawsuit against it, fortunately. So they made it a little bit better than Netflix, but still not a great situation. So, okay, now we're looking at data. We're saying more data is more possibilities for data science. So here's a question I have for you. Today, here and now, 2015, October 1st, is it? What are the data sources you have available? Can we just call some out? What's that? Social media. Sorry? OpenStreetMap, okay. Web analytics, yep. So internet data, all the browsing data, yep. Sensors, yep. Yeah, so there's a lot more every day. So of course, the first thing people think about, and the first thing that started getting people worried, was browsing data. And everyone and their grandmother started noticing that, hey, I'm being tracked. Suddenly, if I go shopping for an item one day, I see it advertised 3 days later on a different website for me. How did that happen? Okay. People started getting freaked out because their browsing history was being recorded in ways that they didn't understand. So that's top of mind right now. Or it has been top of mind for the last couple of years, but there's a lot more than that, which is not top of mind in society. Okay, for many years now, your checkout information has been recorded. So that's not new, but it's still there, okay? Your credit card transaction data gives you geospatial check-in points, which can also be used. Okay, your geospatial locations of your cell phone, within the accuracy of a cell phone tower, can uniquely identify you given 11 data points. Okay, a study was done on that. So just where you're walking with your cell phone with the cell towers will uniquely identify you. Your Wi-Fi, as you walk through a store, is going to uniquely identify you. Okay, RFID chips, which is coming on a $10 billion industry. There's also talk around that, how that's being used to track. It's always been used, of course, in retail, but more and more being used in banking and healthcare. So RFID is another issue. When you're in a store, what's happening? Okay, there's Wi-Fi beacons, which are tracking you, because everyone has a phone in their pocket, most of which are turned on to Wi-Fi, which means your movements around the store can be tracked with Wi-Fi. Small cameras and microphones can also be recording you. As you stop to look at an advertisement in a store, your voice and your face could also be recorded. Okay, biometrics. Okay, this is something, of course, there's the obvious thing about, your fingerprint in your phone, but there's much more than that. Okay, website can notice your typing rhythm. Call center could be recording your voice and analyzing it for signs of stress, signs of dishonesty. Okay, of course, you've got your Fitbit, your heart rate, all these sorts of biometric data, which is also out there. So it's an additional data source which is growing with technology, not as much top of mind. Okay, not as much. You're not going to see the headlines about this as much as you did with the cookies, but it's there, and it's coming more and more top of mind also in the EU Parliament as they talk about regulation. And of course, as a data scientist, you also want to consider it as additional data points for your analysis. Okay. Internet of Things, also a very exciting area, but essentially what this is these are devices that are not moving with you, but they're sending information which is potentially very personal. When did I come home? When did I turn the lights on? Were the lights on dim? Okay. How did I drive my car? Am I a safe driver of my car? Where did I drive my car? Is my toaster getting enough attention? All these things. But there's a lot of potential data which is growing more and more from the Internet of Things, much of which is personal or something could be inferred which is personal from it. Okay. Opportunity for data science, risk for privacy. Okay. Data storage. This is also an issue too, because as I think about data protection and data privacy, it's very easy for me now to, because of the cloud, because of additional tools like Hadoop and Spark, which motivate me to keep more data, I have a tendency to say, let me keep all the data I can. Let me keep all the web analytics data. Let me keep all of the clickstream data, all of the video data, and see what I can do with it. Okay, now I'm opening myself even more to potential risk. Okay, so let me summarize a bit here. So what are we saying? We're saying initially, years ago, people thought of data as what was volunteered, what I told you. I told you if I'm male or female, my age, that type of thing. In the last 10 years, especially with the internet, we're thinking much more in terms of what can be observed. Okay, and that's growing. Okay, that's all customer data, which is growing. Customers are perhaps a bit less aware of it, but as data scientists, you have to be aware of it. As privacy supervisors, you also have to be aware of it, because it's information that can identify and reveal things about an individual. Okay? And then finally, the thing which is this gray part here, which is perhaps the least discussed, is what data science can do with the data. It's the ways that the data science can take data which is not immediately, obviously private, and can start identifying original things about the person, private things about the person, through data science techniques. Okay? And this is where we have to really start looking and realizing that there are new things here that we have to be aware of. Okay? Let me give you an example. The study was done of several thousand people and their Facebook likes. Okay? Just by knowing what you like on Facebook, they could predict with an 85% accuracy whether you were male or female, with a 95% accuracy whether you were an African American. Okay, very high accuracy. I can predict if you're African American just by your Facebook likes. Okay, now let's imagine a company that stored all the Facebook likes for a set of people. They've stored it, they've released it, whatever, and now the study comes out and says, here's a simple way to determine who is African American, ethnic information. Okay, so what I've done is I haven't realized that data I thought was safe is perhaps not actually safe because it's very private and personal. So it's an awareness of how data science fits in with the whole picture of privacy. Okay, it's something we're thinking about more. It's something the EU is also thinking about more in their regulations. Then I have to think about, of course, storage, usage, and sharing it with third parties. Okay, I could go into this a bit more, but I'm running low on time. And I need to talk about privacy, because this is where the big storm is brewing. And this is the thing which, this is really big news, what's happening now. Up until now, there's been no central EU privacy regulation. So when I was at eBay, we had to work separately with data privacy issues in Germany, which were different from those in the Netherlands, different from those in the UK. There's an EU directive, but all the member states were responsible separately for implementing and supervising. 2009, the Lisbon Treaty gave the power for the EU to start legislating on privacy. 2012, the EU Commission began debates on coming up with a privacy regulation. This past June 15th, 3.5 months ago, the EU Commission published their general guidance for the what's called the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. Okay, have you heard of this? I'm just kind of curious. Who has heard of this? So why is this big news? This is now, we went from sort of a nice, let me give you advice, to sort of the big heavy hammer, in the sense that the EU now has the power and has created a draft regulation, 200 pages, mandating how privacy can be enforced in the EU. And again, I don't have a lot of time to go into details about this, but the most important things to mention are, one, it's much stricter in terms of how privacy has to be complied with, much stricter in terms of getting consent for use of data, transparency in use of data, and what really gets the attention of a lot of corporations, it provides for a fine of up to several billion euros for privacy violations. So the largest corporations can face a fine of several billion euros. So it's big news. Okay, so the timeline for this to be finalized is the end of the year. It might push over a few months. Once it's finalized, it's got 2 years before it's actually enforceable. Okay, so it's going to make a big difference in use of data, control of data, transparency for data science is going to be a massive, massive issue. And user consent and violations are going to be enforceable with a huge fine, which is really going to limit the amount of risk people are going to take. What's going to happen then? How did people prepare for this? Like I said, it's 2 years down the road probably until it's actually enforceable. But a lot of the stuff that has to happen to prepare for this has to be, you have to start thinking of it now, okay? So you have to start thinking, what are my data assets, and get your inventory of that. And that's not just what data is top of mind, it's what's the dark data I have. Okay, what's the data that I've collected that I haven't even really realized is personally identifiable? And what data do I have which data science techniques can already de-anonymize? So it's getting an awareness of these other two. Okay? The reason you need an awareness is to do a risk assessment, and also for the principle of privacy by design, which is a foundational principle that says, I'm building things from the start are going to guarantee privacy and full functionality at the same time. So privacy by design is another big topic. There's 7 major points, which I don't have time to get into. But it's to say that this is also something you need to start thinking about now for your roadmap of how you're going to be releasing things, so that 2 years down the road, you're not stuck with something which is not compliant in a privacy matter from a product perspective. Okay. Storage. Okay. Where's your data going now? Do you have control over it? 2 years from now, are there so many copies of your data in unsecured locations or unknown or held by people who you don't realize who has it, that you're no longer able to comply with the storage requirements that will be enforced then? Okay, the right to be forgotten and such. Okay, so if you don't start thinking now about where your data is stored and how it's stored, you won't have control over it 2 years from now. Usage, of course. This is the most interesting thing for data scientists. This has got to be transparent, which means it has to have consent, and that's something you have to think about now. And of course, flow to and from third parties I won't even talk about, but you can imagine how that's going to be affected. Moving forward, as I mentioned, becoming aware of your data ecosystem, becoming aware of privacy regulations, auditing your current storage, compliance, user consent, and viewing product roadmaps, pretty much what I summarized on that last slide. So all things to start thinking about today. And of course, start talking with your privacy officer. You know, have regular communication with them. Okay, this is important because you have to open up communication channels. Bring in third-party experts who understand both the legislation that's in play, which is in the process of developing and almost finalized, and who understand the data science and the data implications. Okay, because like I said, you need to be preparing now, because some of the things that have to be changed can't be changed overnight. It has to be a long-term effort, and the consequences are pretty severe for this. Here's my contact information. I'm based, like you said, I'm based here in the Netherlands, not far from here. I do work internationally, but this is my base. Feel free to contact me by email, Twitter, and such. And I'll be around actually for a few more hours if you want to catch me. I have to leave at about 2:30, but I'll be around for a little while. Thanks very much.